I've been talking recently about empaths coming out of repression. Empaths coming out of repression. First of all, if you're empathic, you may not even think that you're emotionally suppressed. That is perhaps the first barrier, because in spirituality we have often like a self-righteousness about it. Like, I'm empathic, so you don't realize that I can see and hear things that you're not conveying, right? We almost take pride in it, some of us. And there may be some capability there that we have, a sensitivity to life that's actually helped us in a certain way. You know, because I know, because I was one or is one. That's why I can talk about it. What I found, though, see, the difference here is I'm out of breath because I took my doggies out. Excuse me. What I found is that the repression plays into the empathic nature, meaning part of the empath's response to people in relationship is not the empathy, not the empathic nature. It's more the repression of one's own emotions, namely anger and fear, other emotions. How do I know this? By coming out of repression. See, what you don't know about me is that you may know, as an empath, so to speak, and a peacemaking ego, I showed up in the world unable to really get angry. Unable to. It wasn't like I didn't want to. It's like I couldn't, or it wouldn't come up. So that's how deeply repressed I was around anger. And I'm not anymore. Like, I can come at you like a freight train now if I want. And I don't do that. I don't just unleash that on everyone. But what I'm saying is that that valve that holding that back is opened. And what it did is it showed me that a lot of what I was calling empathic nature is actually repression. Because I know this by the fruits of it. I know this by the things that I've seen that have come up for me. I know it by the before and after. Before meaning before repression work, and after. Clear difference. Let me show you what I mean. Before, it would be things like, I don't really want to be around those people. Too loud, too obnoxious, too unconscious, angry, complaining all the time, blaming. Forget it. Boundary. I'm going over here. And I did that a lot, actually. Boundaries. Boundaries, though, that weren't coming from clarity. They were coming from my own repression. In other words, I had repressed this, particularly this emotion, anger and aggression and hatred. I had pushed those down like so many do. And so having pushed that down and holding it in the body, in what was for me spinal pain, I had a spinal condition, so you know, that showed up as chronic pain, very serious debilitating pain at times. That's been healed through repression work. So where I was once had a debilitating disease, which puts most everybody in disability with this disease, I am thriving in the flow of life with no pain. This is why I want to share this with you, especially the empaths, around this repression, because even though it feels like it's just your empathic nature separating yourself up, you from people, like boundary here, boundary there, you could be leading yourself into sickness, chronic pain, further body contraction. You don't know it. I didn't know it. I didn't know that all that sort of like, I don't want to be around this person's energy is all that stuff. Or this thing about, I need to go and be alone for a while because I don't want to be around all these people. I didn't realize that that was the repression operating in my life. I thought it was just my empathic nature. So coming out of repression, the empathic nature is still here. In other words, I can sense people's energy, but it isn't the same thing. So the walls come down. Being around angry people is not a problem at all. It's most like, okay, let's pull up the popcorn and watch and just be involved and not hide from it. Because I'm not hiding from the anger within me. See? And here, before you listen to me, please, before you start saying while you're listening to me that you've already dealt with your anger, stop. Because that's how you're going to build yourself back into a wall with this thing. Don't come to this message that way. Don't come. That's the self-righteousness of the empath or the ego that says, I've already dealt with this. I'm just trusting my sensitivity here. That's how you build that fortress, and you reinforce it by shutting this message out. You're not going to want to shut this message out. Trust me. I mean, you might want to, but once you hear what I'm saying and that the science is backing it, in other words, science is telling us, whether you're reading the science or not, it doesn't matter. It's still telling us that repressing anger and fear and other things is having devastating effects on our health, and we don't even know it until we get older. It wasn't until I was 48 years old that the chronic pain really started to come up. Before that, it was just empath, boundaries. I don't want to be around this person. I'd rather surround myself with peaceful people. That's all that was through the years. That was all concretizing into a serious health issue. So before you dismiss me, I'm just telling you, be careful. Be really, really careful. Because this empathic conditioning and this way of being will literally pull the wool over your eyes, and you will argue in favor of your own repression while you're listening to this. You will literally argue in favor of your empathic nature, which is because it's so connected to the repression, you're arguing in favor of an unconscious control mechanism. Is that what you want to do? Is that what you want to do? Is argue in favor of your own unconscious control mechanism around these emotions. And before you say you don't repress these things, take the test that I've put on YouTube. There's a test. It's called Are You Repressing Emotion? It's on YouTube, Scott Kiloby. It's a simple test that runs through the various emotions, energies that we may or may not repress or suppress. Please, please go into experience. You cannot let the mind that created this try to solve it. You can't let the mind that created this repression and thinks it's a really good idea and it's unconscious try to come to this message. It will not work. It will not work. I'm telling you. You're going to have to go into experience. And the first foray is to take that test. And then take that test, and if you find that there's a somatic response with regard to some of those repression inquiries, then come back and listen to this or some of my other videos, or better yet, join the members area, because that's where we're doing the work. Kiloby.com, scroll down the drop-down menu at the top, Kiloby members area. But first, before you let your arguments shut me down, go take that test. Even if you stop the video right now, find it, take it. Because I'm telling you, I put up a fuss against this kind of conversation for years. And it was in a non-dual realization from my own, so to speak, direct experience of non-duality. I'm a non-dual teacher. I denied this aspect of the unconscious. I argued in favor of the repression unknowingly by saying there's nothing to this. These are just words, I would say. These are just concepts, just a story. No. Repression is not just a story. It's a mechanism that's unconsciously controlling our lives. Don't dismiss, because you can, but there can be devastating effects of dismissing something like this. If you don't believe me, you may have to live it out, and it can be really, really painful. And you can't see it coming when it's coming. And it shows up as disease or chronic pain or body contraction or a mental health issue that is persistent and not responsive to spiritual practice or therapy. A relationship issue which just keeps happening. Inability to really set firm boundaries. Lack of boundaries. And I mean like really healthy boundaries. Not the kind of boundaries of the empath that just says I got to get away from everybody who's angry. But like with repression, there's a lack of being able to really stand up to someone and say, don't. You can't. It's not acceptable for you to do that. I'm not going to go quiet here. I'm going to speak. See, a lot of empaths can't do that. Some can. Your voice sometimes goes offline with repression. Your capacity to ask for what you want and need in a relationship goes offline with repression, if it's anger repression. Your capacity to set really firm, healthy boundaries can go offline. So the boundaries that I'm talking about that empaths set, those are boundaries that you have to set because you haven't dealt with the repression within you. Once you deal with the repression, if it's there, a lot of those boundaries don't have to be there anymore. They're there to energetically protect you. Now, here's the thing about being an empath, is you can be so convinced. This is where it gets so, hear this. This is where it gets really unconscious. You can be so convinced that you're actually feeling someone else's energy when it's actually your own repression. How do I know that? Because when I was repressing anger, when I would bump up against angry people, it would seem like I was feeling their anger, and therefore I was setting a boundary against their anger. That is not what was happening. That was an energetic shadow on the somatic level, meaning a part of myself got cut off. The part that's angry got cut off early in childhood and remained cut off during spiritual practices. And with that being cut off, it's literally like any shadow. It's repressed. So repressed anger, for example, held in the body, not conscious of it. Then it becomes a shadow when I would see other people who are angry. And then I would say, I'm feeling their anger. And that's the unconsciousness. Because even if they're angry, really what you're objecting to on an unconscious level is the arising of your own anger. And you can't see it. And you'll just keep doing it. And I see it done every day. Unconscious empaths setting boundaries based on their own repressions and then saying it's someone else's energy. And that's how it completely hides. I see these memes on social media that empaths will put out there like, because I've been hurt or I'm tuned into the hurt of humanity, I am sensitive to all of the suffering in the world and the suffering of other people. And that's part of the empathic nature. But the thing is part of the reason that you're sensitive to all that suffering is because you repress those emotions within yourself. Sorry, that's what it is. I don't want to generalize. I don't want to say that every empath listening to me has this, but I just keep seeing it in the clients that I work with over and over and over. They show up with an empathic nature, but then there's repression right there under the surface. The two go together like peanut butter and jelly. Now, why do I care? I really don't. Because my job was just to come out of repression in my life. That's my whole job. That's my work in this lifetime. And that work has been done. And if there's anything else to see, be open to see that. My work's done. So why should I care about whether you do this work? I don't, ultimately. Because if you want to suffer in that, you go right ahead. That actually brought about an incredible amount of suffering for me, and I know where it goes. And if you want to endure that, if you want to go down with that ship, like where you get diagnosed someday with cancer, and then you're looking around going, what caused this? And then you do a little research and you'll see there's maybe several causes to it, but one of them is the repression of anger or depression. The studies say that depression sometimes precedes cancer, and depression is often anger again, turned inwards. So you can wait for the diagnosis. Like, if that's what you want to do, you can do that. I did that. It was hell on earth, but I did that. You have every right to do that. But compassion and love calls me to come forth and say, you don't have to do that. You really don't. And maybe nobody else in your life saying this to you. It's a pretty new message that many empaths are just repressed and traumatized and may know it but don't really have the consciousness to see it yet. Like, who else is really saying that to you? So that's why I'm saying it, just because nobody said it to me. You can still argue with me. So I notice that certain people are coming to this empathic repression conversation on YouTube. There's many people watching these videos. But also that doesn't always translate to people doing the work. So I know that I want to communicate a little bit more to you, those folks who are just doing the kind of passing by this video and hearing it and resonating and liking it, but then not doing the work. So let me just give you some ways in to see this in your life. Do this. The next time you're around somebody who has energy, especially anger, that you don't like, and that you're sensing, like I sense their anger from that empathic nature, what I want you to do is what you normally do. Pull away from that person, because that's what you do, right? Normally. Pull away from the person. As soon as you pull away from them, go into your body. Bring awareness into your inner body, into where you're feeling any place that you're storing energy, like contraction, chronic pain. And then pull that person back up in your awareness. Just observe the person in awareness while you're feeling in your body. And say this. Say, anger is allowed here. And like in this relationship, anger is allowed. And feel into your body. And if you feel the body activate, that's the unconscious telling you that anger is not allowed. But it's not just that anger is not allowed in that person. I want you then to turn around and say, I can get angry back at that person. I can express anger back to the person. I can set a boundary. I can speak to that person. Those kinds of prompts. I can get angry. I can speak up. And see if you feel a similar somatic no to that. Like something in the body that just when you say that it contracts or tightens or activates. That's the repression. And it's hiding a bunch of programming connected to it. You may not be able to see it, but there's a whole bunch of programming that's connected to that sensation that comes up there. If you don't see the programming, you'll live your life by the contraction, basically. In other words, whenever that contraction comes up around people, you'll pull away from them. You'll go into silence or solitude, or you'll go around peaceful people. But the contraction won't be dealt with because it contains the anger repression for you. And so then every time you're around somebody who's angry for a while, pull back from them and say, anger's allowed here. And then go into, I can get angry back. Or I can speak freely back to the person. And if each time you're getting just this contraction coming up, even if you don't hear it say no, that's what it's saying. And you're going to have a lifetime of that. A lifetime of that contraction. And so if you're on a spiritual path or in therapy, and part of it is focusing on that contraction and the way that it creates problems for you in your life, you're going to have difficulty releasing or dissolving that contraction as long as you're holding on to and holding back this anger or fear or guilt or shame or whatever it is. Hurt. We're holding a lot of this stuff back and we don't see it. So it's almost like when you're arguing against this message, you're arguing in favor of a hardened body, a contracted body. You're literally like a cheerleader for your own contraction. Like, I want to keep this here. It's not conscious, but by not going into this area, it's almost like arguing in favor of your own pain. So if you're in chronic pain right now, the science is saying that a lot of chronic pain situations are actually repression. So if you're dismissing this message and then going back to your usual habit of pulling back from people and not doing these inquiries that I'm showing you, it's like you're a cheerleader for your own suffering. You're arguing in favor of it. And you have every right to do that, of course. But after a while, if you keep doing this inquiry that I'm pointing to, you start to wake up to there's something going on here that I can't see. Maybe I feel it when I'm around those people, but I can't see the mind. It's an unconscious mind. And then you may be interested in the Kiloby inquiries or some method that truly pulls up the unconscious mind that's operating there. And when you pull it up, basically you're going to find it's very, very unconscious. But when you pull it up, it's basically saying no, you can't, don't, hold that back. It's a thought, a mechanism, a mind-body mechanism. What you're noticing is the body part of it, the sensation, the contraction, the pain. But there's always a mind-body connection. So the fact that you can't see the mind doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means it's unconscious. If you feel the contraction, that's your way in. But now what I see people doing is like they're resting with contractions and they're staying repressed. So what I'm saying not to do is just when you feel the contraction, just allow it unless you have a lot of skill that fully allows it until it dissolves. What I see happening is the contraction will come up, and if you have a somatic based practice, you'll allow the contraction, but it won't really dissolve, or maybe dissolves a little bit, and it kind of recedes to the background. So that it's no longer really a contraction that you feel. And you feel like you've moved through that trigger, whatever it is, but you haven't. Because part of the trigger is holding back anger. So the holding back of that anger is in that contraction, the programming with it. And so the programming recedes further into unconsciousness. And now you're stuck because you can't break through this barrier, this repression. But I've given you some keys here. So remember, next time you find yourself, let's just work with anger first. Next time you see yourself pulling away from somebody who's angry, or even complaining or blaming or judging, because those are the fruits of anger, right? A lot of complaining and judging and blaming comes from anger. So you might even sense that in people. Pull away and just say, pull that person back up. Anger is allowed here to see if there's any objection. See, you're looking for objection first in the body, maybe in the mind, and then move to those inquiries. I can get angry back to them, or I can speak up back to them. Look for any objection, mainly the body, right? Contraction or pain or something. That's all I'm asking, because I'm giving you just a little bit of inquiry here so you can move beyond just watching these videos to seeing there's something here and that you want to explore it. Now, here's the other barrier to this. When people do find that there's repression because they're listening to things like this and they're checking in with these inquiries, then what happens is we often go back to the old practices that don't work. This is what you have to hear. If the practices that you've been doing or the therapies that you've been doing, if they were to have reached repression, you would not still be doing this. And that's some of your best evidence is no matter how, I hear this all the time, I've already processed this. I've already processed that. I got angry here. Your best evidence is if you're still doing the same thing in relationship. That's your best evidence. Your best evidence is not going to come from your mind, which would like you to believe that you've already worked through that. It doesn't matter what the mind says, the conscious mind. This is all in the unconscious. So before you go back to your old methods, remember that if those methods would have worked, you wouldn't even be drawn to this video. Because being drawn to this video usually means there's something here that you're hearing and you're going, yes. Now, if your old practices would have reached that, you wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't have been drawn to this video. The fact that you're drawn, this should not point you back to the same practices that didn't work. See, that just doesn't work. I had to give up almost every single practice that I was using, even things that weren't practices, like just beingness, being, pain and awareness, allowing it. Even that, to the extent it's a practice, it all failed. All of it failed. My best evidence that my practices failed was the fact that I was still doing that. There was pain in my body, and I was still, from that empathic way of being, pulling myself away from people who were angry or experiencing this or expressing this emotion. That was my evidence. So it wasn't hard for me to see that, well, apparently none of my practices worked because I was experiencing pain and this same thing happening. So I had to be really open. This message, hearing this, requires an openness like never before to find, like the Kiloby inquiries, like our work, something that truly prompts up the unconscious conditioning going on for you when you're triggered around people who are, you say you're sensing their energy. You may be sensing their energy, but energy is energy. It doesn't belong to anyone. So if there's anger in someone and you're reacting to it, it's in you. Even if you don't know it, it's in you. And again, it may be showing up as pain or contraction or anxiety or something. Again, because repression leads to mental health issues. So it could be showing up as bipolar. It could be showing up as some other mental health issue. It could be showing up as a physical issue or condition. You really have to have your antennas up on this one, because this thing's going to want to hide from you in so many different ways. And it's not just about being in awareness. It's about hearing the message and not letting it hide anymore. It's part of this is cognitive. Get it in your mind that there might be something missing. And you may have to read science to really hear it. Science is studying it now. You may have to come back here a few times to really, really let the mind hear it, to break down the conscious mind's objections to this message. The conscious mind is like a gatekeeper. It's like, no, I don't have that. Yeah, that's an interesting topic, Scott, but I don't have that. That's the gate of the conscious mind. That's how the unconsciousness remains unconscious. The gate of the conscious mind. So when Einstein said you can't use the same mind that created a problem to fix it, that's what I'm talking about. Your conscious mind is not going to be able to do this because your conscious mind is the gatekeeper. It's the one that's saying, yeah, this is a good message, but I don't have that. Or, I have that, but I'm not going to go do the Kill the Bee inquiries. See, it's just stopping you as many ways as it can, like a gate. But what that's doing is it's reinforcing suffering. See, have your antennas up. Look for the diseases, the conditions in your life, the chronic pain, the body contraction. Look at how relationship is tricky still for you, where you're maybe hiding from people and pulling away from people. Anyone who shows up anything other than peaceful or present, or you know what I mean by that. Keep your antennas up. Keep listening to me. We'll break down that conscious mind. This is the first gate, is just the thinking mind, the mind that you're aware of. The mind that's disagreeing with me now, there's your gatekeeper. Do some work on that level and start trusting your body and watching your relationships. Don't listen to the mind. Listen to how you feel when you're around people, and then go into inquiry. That inquiry gets into the unconscious mind, the unconscious stuff. Your conscious mind will just stay there on the conscious level, telling whatever story it wants to tell to justify this in your life. You'll literally justify your empathic nature and stay repressed and traumatized. I know because I've seen it and because I've lived it. Again, if you want to hear more or actually do the work, Kill the Bee members area, go to killabee.com, scroll down. You'll see Kill the Bee members area right there.